Welcome back everyone to the Bucks County Conservation District's Backyard Vegetable Gardening web series. Last week we talked all about the spotted lanternfly, from its history and identification to installing tree bands and circle traps. Today's video is going to be about container gardening. So far, this series has focused on gardening out of a raised bed, but there are so many other ways to grow your own food. Container gardening is a great option if you just want to dip your toes into the world of gardening or you don't have enough outdoor space. Either way, you can easily have a thriving vegetable garden growing out of containers. When choosing which containers to grow out of, you can use almost anything that can hold soil and plants. This is a really great opportunity to repurpose old items, thrift cool containers, as opposed to purchasing brand new plant pots. The one thing that you definitely want to make sure of is that they have drainage holes at the bottom, and if not, then you're going to need to drill them yourself. This is really important because if your pot doesn't have a drainage hole, then your plants will be sitting in still water and the roots will rot. One other thing to keep in mind is if you're using plastic containers, you need to make sure that the plastic is food safe. Each container will have a label on it showing what type of plastic it is, and I'll link a website in the description where you can go and check each type of plastic and if it's food safe or not. This is so important when container gardening to make sure that everything is food safe, because it can leach chemicals into the soil which can then be absorbed by your plants. Next is container size. The main thing to consider when choosing this is the plant's root system. You want to make sure you provide enough soil for the plants so that their roots can grow comfortably and to avoid root circling. Some examples of plants with really large root systems are tomatoes, artichokes, and watermelon. Plants such as these require at least 2 to 3 feet of soil depth to grow comfortably. Medium root length plants include beans, cucumbers, and peppers. These types of plants require around 2 feet of soil depth. And lastly, there are shallow rooted plants, things like lettuce, potatoes, and broccoli. These plants require around 1.5 feet of soil. You can always transfer your plants to a larger container if they outgrow their current one. You typically want your container to be a little too large rather than a little too small. Keeping root depth in mind is really helpful when looking at your shallow rooted plants, because you don't want to waste them in a really deep container since that bottom soil isn't going to be utilized. That's just a waste of money and good quality soil. Once you find the containers that you want to use, you will need to decide how to fill it. The following information on soil will be the exact same that I provided in the How to Build a Raised Garden Bed video, so you can go and skip ahead if you've already seen that one. When filling your containers, you can purchase a bagged mix or you can create your own. If you decide to create your own mix, the main components that you will need to focus on are a good nutrient and water holding capacity, good drainage, and high organic matter. Nutrient and water holding capacity is essential to feed your plants and ensure that your soil doesn't dry out too quickly. Things like peat moss or coir, which is coconut fiber, can be added to your mix to bump up the nutrient and water holding capacity. Next is good drainage. This is really important to ensure that your soil isn't too wet and your plants don't rot and sit in water. You can add things like sand or perlite to your mix to increase the drainage. Last is the key to any healthy mix, organic matter. This is decomposed plant and animal tissue in the forms of compost. Organic matter is where all those good microbes, bacteria, and insects live to form that thriving below ground ecosystem. Organic matter is an essential component to improve the structure, texture, and fertility of your soil. You can make your own container gardening mix by combining a nutrient and water holding capacity component such as peat moss or coir, a drainage component such as sand or perlite, and organic matter in the form of compost. This is the best option if you do make your own compost using food scraps and leaf litter. At-home composting is a great way to recycle nutrients, putting them back into the earth and growing your own food from it. But creating your own container gardening mix is not completely necessary. It's a pretty advanced step, as there are plenty of great bagged mix options that provide all the same benefits as the one you could create yourself. Once your plants are in their containers, you want to find the perfect spot for them with at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day. And then when it comes to watering, every day you can check if they need to be watered by simply sticking your finger into the soil about 1 inch deep. If it's still moist, then it does not need to be watered. Leave it alone and wait until the next day. Only water it when the soil is completely dry. This tip also applies for watering your raised bed as well. And then you can also check out my previous video on fertilizing vegetable gardens to find out when to fertilize and what type of fertilizer to use. When it comes to the plants themselves, you can sow seeds directly into the container, start seeds indoors and transplant them as seedlings, or just purchase already grown seedlings and repot them into your containers. I made myself an herb container garden, and to do this I just purchased seedlings out of simplicity and repotted them, as you can see here. I also have another container where I planted all of my extra seedlings that didn't fit in my raised garden bed. This is a really great option, so no seedlings go to waste. You can really grow any plant that you would typically grow in a vegetable garden in a container really easily. Container gardening is a really great option for those who are tight on outdoor space or just want to try out growing their own food before committing to a full backyard vegetable garden. It's really great because you can grow plants in almost any container, so feel free to get creative with it. I hope this video was helpful to encourage you to grow fruits, vegetables, or herbs in containers. Next week, we're going to go over some really great ways you can practice water conservation at home easily. Thank you so much for watching this week's video, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.